Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's Wednesday Educational Talk series. Today's topic, we will be covering sleep after brain injury and looking at some of the questions, why is it different, and what you can do to help. This webinar will be hosted by the lovely Catherine Wiseman-Hakes. Catherine is a speech-language pathologist and has a PhD in rehabilitation neuroscience. So as I mentioned earlier, we'll learn about how and why sleep patterns change after brain injury, and here are suggestions for achieving better and more restful sleep. A little bit more about what we will be covering today is many people find their sleep challenges after a brain injury, and many go on to experience long-term sleep and wakefulness issues. This impacts recovery and day-to-day function. This presentation will explain how and why sleep patterns change after brain injury, and will provide suggestions for achieving better and more restful sleep. All right, so without further ado, I will welcome Catherine.
Okay, well, thank you so very much. I just wanted to say a big thank you to Ellen and Madison for this kind opportunity and warm welcome. And it's really my pleasure to be here to talk with you today about a problem that is so pervasive and experienced by so many people following brain injury. So before we get into the talk, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about me. As Madison said, I am a speech language pathologist, and many people are curious or surprised when they hear that I also do sleep research. And the reason I do this is in my clinical practice in speech language pathology, I started to observe how many people had sleep problems after brain injury, and it really impacted their recovery and it impacted their thinking, it impacted their communication, it impacted their mental health, and it really impacted everything. And I thought back to my days. I'm in addition to being a clinician and a researcher, I'm a mom. I'm a mom to 3 young adult kids. I'm a mom to fur babies. You may see my cat or my puppy in the presentation, or you may hear barking. If you do, that's who it is. Um, but as I say, so I remember back to being pregnant and having my 3 kids in the span of 5 years. And my kids were terrible sleepers when they were babies. And one would finally start to sleep, and then the next one would go into a cycle of poor sleep. And between the 3 of them, I probably went through a period of about maybe 7 years of very, very disrupted sleep. And I felt terrible. And it impacted my memory, it impacted my mood. I just felt terrible. So I thought about how I felt, and while I don't have a brain injury, I thought about if I feel this bad, I can imagine how it is impacting all of the people that I was working with. So that was my aha moment to actually go back and research this. So my journey was I actually went and I audited a course in sleep physiology at the University of Toronto, and it was so interesting. And the professor said to me, "Gosh, that's kind of weird. Like, what are you doing here?" And so I explained who I was and that I worked with people with brain injuries. And he was also very interested. So he said, "Why don't you come and do a talk at the university to our sleep medicine and research rounds?" And I thought, well, gosh, what could I have to say, as a speech language pathologist? But he said, no, this is a really important area that had not been researched. So long story short, I came and I did a talk, and I brought a client with me who was dealing with sleep issues. And that led me then to say, I really need to go and research this formally. So that's how I became interested in sleep and brain injury. And I'm aware that that sleep impacts everything. So that's why we're here today. Okay, and now I just need to figure out how. There we go. So before we get into that, again, I wanted to acknowledge that I am in Toronto and that I am a settler in this territory, which is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat peoples. And I just wanted to take a moment to reflect and acknowledge my privilege and gratitude in being able to live and work on these lands. And I hope that we all have an opportunity to continue with the work of reconciliation and truth, and further reflection. So, what are we going to talk about today? So, I always like to give an overview of what is sleep and looking at sleep across the lifespan, because our sleep does change with age, but it helps you to think about what's happening with sleep after brain injury. So we'll start with normal sleep, and then we'll move into sleep after brain injury. And then I want you to have some tips to take away for optimizing sleep and wakefulness. And I always add wakefulness because that's part of the whole package. We have to be able to maintain sleep at night, but we also want to be able to maintain wakefulness during the day. And then finally, we'll have some time for questions and discussion. So, why does sleep matter? So, this is a famous quote by Beatrice the biologist, and it says here, sleep makes your brain sparkle. And while that's not accurate from a, a physiological perspective, good sleep really makes a huge difference in terms of our overall brain function. So, sleep is absolutely integral to human health and development. It's necessary for all learning, memory, our cognition, so all of our thinking abilities, recovery, repair, so recovery from illness, recovery from injury, repair from injury. It underlies our growth and development. And it's also very important for clearing neurotoxins in the brain. So, for example, people with later cognitive degenerative disabilities such as Alzheimer's, et cetera, tend to have poor sleep. Now, I am going to apologize profusely because, as I mentioned, I have a puppy at home and she is at the door and I need to let her in before she knocks it down. So I will literally 1 second. Thank you. Thank you, and I hope that will be the only oh, only interruption. She wants to say a quick hello. There we go. That's Lily. All right. So again, sleep underlies every aspect of human health, growth, development, and well-being, and it also underlies decline with aging, meaning we get less sleep and there's associations with decline. So this is a very important quote. Sleep is of the brain, for the brain, and by the brain. It is the price we pay for neuroplasticity. And that is really important because of all of the neuroplastic changes in our brains. And as brain injury survivors, we really try to capitalize on, in addition to strategies, but also on neuroplasticity for our recovery. So sleep is absolutely critical for that. So let's just talk about what is normal sleep, because we don't just fall asleep and wake up and our brains just kind of shut down and be quiet throughout the night. There's actually a lot happening in our brain while we're sleeping. So in a typical normal adult sleep, we should in theory fall asleep within about 10 to 20 minutes. So I know that one of the big challenges following brain injury is that people take a very long time to fall asleep, but that is the ideal. So when we're sleeping, we also go through 4 sleep stages per night. And each of these stages is important from a cognitive perspective and also a brain and body health. So we have our stage 1, 2, 3. and then our rapid eye movement, which is our REM sleep. And you've probably heard about REM sleep. So stage 1, 2, and 3 are considered non-REM sleep, plus our REM cycle, and all that together lasts about 90 minutes. So ideally, we should have about 5 cycles per night, which means we have 5 times where we go through stage 1, 2, 3 REM, 1, 2, 3 REM across the night. Now, there are also, each stage is associated with a different type of sleep. So our recovery sleep, our deep, slow wave sleep, which we really need when we're sick or exhausted or recovering from brain injury, the pressure for our slow wave sleep, we tend to have more slow wave sleep during the first half of the night. And then our REM sleep, which is often the sleep where we dream the most, predominates the last half of the night. So that's why if you wake up early, you might be in the middle of a dream when your alarm goes off, and that's because we have most of our REM sleep in the last half of the night. Most of the night, up to 60%, is spent in what we call stage 2 sleep. Be quiet. Not you. Talking to my dog, I apologize. And there's a reason why we spend so much time in stage 2. So what does this look like? Some of you may, in fact, have had a sleep study, not everyone, but what exactly does it look like when we're measuring sleep? So this is kind of a weird looking diagram, but across the bottom here, we see the number of hours of sleep and the different stages. So we start off here awake. So we're awake, and some of us may be processing better than others right now, but most of us are awake. So then we go into our very light stage 1 sleep, and then we move into stage 2, stage 3 down here, which is our slow wave sleep. And you see here, the black is our REM sleep. So again, we don't have as much REM at the beginning, but about halfway through the night, we start to get more REM sleep. And at the beginning of the night, we have more slow wave sleep, and that's less during the rest of the night. Now, one thing I'm going to show you here is that in theory, we shouldn't actually wake up too often throughout the night, because if we do, our sleep is what we call fragmented. And I imagine that that's something that many of you struggle with. So here we do wake up to some degree, or we will become aroused. We may not completely wake, but in theory, we shouldn't wake up too many times during the night, and we should fall right back to sleep. So this is what it should look like from a normal, healthy sleep. So I talked a little bit about sleep stages. And again, there's no test. You don't need to remember this. It's just to provide you with some background understanding. So stage 1, which is, again, the early, when we're just sort of transitioning from being awake to falling asleep, this is our light transitional sleep. This is where drowsiness and sleep begin. So in stage 2, this is very important because this is where our more stable sleep begins to occur. We can easily be woken up when we're in stage 1, but in stage 2, our brain actually releases chemicals that block external and internal stimuli that prevent us from being woken up. So stage 3 is our deep sleep, and I talked about that. That's our slow wave sleep. It's the recovery. It's where most of the recovery comes. And not surprisingly, people in the early stages following a brain injury, including concussion, need a lot of that stage 3 sleep. So also, our growth hormone is released during the night. So for those of you who are parents, you may actually say, oh my gosh, my child got bigger over the night. And literally, they do. In fact, I keep watching my puppy, and every morning she comes out of her crate where she sleeps, and we think, gosh, you literally grew in the night. And in fact, she probably did. So then, as I said, stage 3 is the deep sleep. And then we have our REM sleep, and this is revitalizing for the brain. So our brains are actually extremely active during REM sleep. And as I said, this is the period where dreaming is most likely to occur. So that's just a little introduction to what's actually going on. Now, I also wanted to just mention a little bit about sleep across the lifespan because I have to admit I'm a total geek. I'm a total neuro geek, which is what partly got me into brain injury. I find the brain so fascinating. And when we're infants, we sleep a lot. And what's really interesting is that infants spend a lot of time in REM sleep. And the reason they do that is because their senses have not developed to the extent that they can take in a lot of stimuli from their world. And our brains need stimuli in order to grow and to have neuroplasticity. Every night when we go to sleep, our brains kind of consolidate all of the experiences that we've had during the day. And that's what facilitates our neuroplasticity. So for a baby, the REM sleep, where the brain is very active, actually acts as the brain stimulation and helps the baby's brain to grow and develop. So once the baby's senses are more mature and more developed, and they're awake for more periods of time because they can see, they can hear, they can start to interact with their caregivers in the world around them, they don't need that internal stimulation to make their brains develop. And so the REM sleep actually drops. So I think that's pretty cool. So as you can see, infancy is a time where we need a lot of sleep. Childhood and adolescence, again, periods of immense sleep, and particularly in adolescence where brains are undergoing rapid periods of development. And so sleep, again, is a huge need. So sleep is critical for all brain development. Then as we get older, our sleep stabilizes. Um, Most people maybe need a little bit less sleep. In full disclosure, I need a minimum of 8 hours of sleep a night, and I function best when I can get 9. So, yes, there are the few people that can manage with, 4 or 5 hours of sleep. Um, but for the most part, we need more. So I will respond. I see your question, Marie, about training our brains to get more sleep, and I will comment on that towards the end. Okay. Again, I'll respond to the questions at the end, but just so that you know, I do see them. Okay. So as we get a lot older, we do need the same amount of sleep, but it is harder to sleep. And so we do often see later in life that poor sleep, is associated with cognitive aging problems and often with various types of dementias. So what makes a good sleep? You've heard me use the word fragmented and unfragmented sleep. So ideally, we want our sleep to be unfragmented, meaning we don't want to be waking up or being aroused a lot across the night. And again, I know that's a big problem for people with brain injuries. So we also want to make sure that we get all the stages an adequate number of cycles. So ideally we should have about 5, but 4 is fine. Anything less than that, and we're not getting enough sleep. We also want to have a relatively small percentage of stage 1, which is the light sleep. And once again, I know that's a big problem for people with brain injuries, is that their sleep may be very light and they feel like they never actually get into that deep, restful sleep. So we do need, as I mentioned, a good percentage of that slow wave sleep, as well as REM sleep, which is also very important. So that's the ideal sleep. So what happens following brain injury? Obviously, you're here because we know that there's lots and lots of issues with sleep following brain injuries. Many people, probably about 80% of people with brain injuries struggle with sleep issues. So sleep changes immediately following a brain injury, regardless of severity. And in many cases, it becomes a chronic problem. So sleep is a very complex process, which is why I spent the time showing you a little bit about what's actually happening while we're sleeping. It's not like our brains just, as I said, shut down and then we wake up feeling refreshed. There's so much going on. It's like a great choreography in the brain of different neurotransmitters and parts of the brain working to help us fall asleep and stay asleep and clear the brain of toxins. So for this reason, and depending on the location and extent of the injury, there's many different kinds of sleep and wake disturbances that occur. So it's not just one type of sleep problem that people have following brain injury. So there are also other contributing factors, though, and these are things that we can where we always begin from a treatment or a management perspective. So first of all, people's schedules often change following a brain injury. Maybe prior to your injury, you were working, 8:30 to 4:30 or 9 to 5, or maybe you work night shifts, but you had a big chunk of your day that was scheduled. And maybe your day is not so scheduled now. And it's easy to just take your time. And if we need, following a brain injury, again, we need more time. We're slower to process. So our schedules tend to be less heavy. And so our whole sleep phase cycle may actually shift. Activity levels might be different. They might be less. And it might be because of pain, physical injury. It might be because our mood is such that we really don't feel like going out. But a fixed schedule and a good amount of activity and physical exercise is really important for good sleep. Mental health problems. Again, these are so closely related with sleep problems. And we know that if we're feeling depressed, we want to sleep more, but our sleep isn't restful, which makes us more depressed. And so it's a real cycle. Same thing with anxiety. If we're having anxiety about sleep, oh my gosh, I'm not going to fall asleep. This is terrible. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, and we get ourselves into this cycle. And all of those things affect our sleep. Some medications can also impact sleep. Some medications can impact sleep positively. There are some antidepressants that can help, that protect sleep and facilitate sleep. Some people are on anti-seizure medication, and those tend to make people very sleepy and can impact cognition. So there's, again, a very broad number of medications that people often take following brain injury, and it's really important to check with your doctor about the interaction with sleep. Sorry. So how does it impact our health and well-being? We know that not sleeping well can increase or worsen our anxiety, our fatigue, our irritability. Sleep is closely connected to our mood. And regardless of whether or not we have a brain injury, if we don't sleep, we're very irritable and we're very quick to snap or jump. Our thinking, it's good sleep is critical for being able to sustain our attention over time. If we don't pay attention, we can't remember, so it's important for memory. It can impact things like brain fog. It impacts our communication. When we don't sleep well, we have even more difficulty following conversations, word finding, organizing our sentences, our social communication. We have less bandwidth for chit chat and smiling and saying the right thing. So it's very, very important. And so sleep problems exacerbate many of the other challenges that people experience following brain injury. Again, as I've said, it's highly interactive and associative with depression and mood and our overall sense of well-being. So as I know you know, and as I've said, I mean, sleep really does impact every aspect of our life. So as I mentioned, there are a number of different types of sleep challenges that people experiencing following brain injury. Lots of people actually have more than one type of sleep issue. Pardon me for 1 second. Again, I do apologize. I will be right back. There we go. I do apologize. I know that that's very unprofessional. I'm sorry. My dog was busy chewing on something. So she now has a toy, and I'm very hopeful that that will be the last disruption. So let me come back. And I apologize. I know it's hard for you. If I break what I'm saying, it could be hard for you to refocus. So again, I really apologize for that. So as I said, there are a few types of sleep problems that are more typical, and it's not uncommon for people to have more than one type of sleep problem. So insomnia is the most common problem. And what that means is difficulty with falling asleep or staying asleep or waking too early in the morning, or sleep that does not make you feel rested. Okay, so as I say, this is the most common sleep problem following brain injury. However, there are other types of sleep problems that can cause someone to have insomnia. On the opposite side, some people have what we call excessive daytime sleepiness, extreme drowsiness, and these are less common, but these people need to sleep a lot, like 12, 15 hours a day. And again, that can be equally disruptive to having a fulfilling life. Delayed sleep phase syndrome. So this is where, as I said, our sleep patterns are literally mixed up. And maybe we fall asleep at 1 in the morning and then we sleep till noon. And we are creatures of habit. Our brains like to do things in similar patterns every day. So if we start to go to sleep at 1 and wake up at noon, again, our brains and our bodies get used to that. And so if we then suddenly have an appointment at 9 or 10, it's very difficult for us to function. So literally people's circadian rhythm and their sleep phases do get shifted. And so that's another area that's important to have assessed by a doctor. Another is narcolepsy. This is where people just fall asleep suddenly and uncontrollably during the day. This is actually not very common following brain injury, but again, it is a type of sleep problem that we do see. So as I said, those are the most common. And often we see more than one type of sleep problem. So another common sleep problem following brain injury is called sleep apnea. And this is literally difficulty breathing falling when a person is asleep. So there's two types of apnea. And one is called obstructive sleep apnea. And that happens when people are lying on their back and literally the weight of their throat and their neck collapses the airway and they stop breathing. So this is a type of sleep apnea that is treated by a CPAP machine. Some of you may have heard about that. The other type is called central apnea, which is also treated by a CPAP machine, but that's where the signal is coming from the brain to stop the breathing. So if a person is quite slender, does not have a big neck, or they're not heavy, it may actually be essential apnea. Either way, the brain is not getting enough oxygen, so it's very, very important. And not surprisingly, over time, with reduced activity, maybe some weight gain due to medication, people become more susceptible to sleep apnea. If we have sleep apnea and we're not breathing properly, we wake up. Our bodies will wake us up every time we have an apneic episode. So that ends up feeling like insomnia because you can't maintain your sleep overnight. Another important one that's fairly common following brain injury is leg movements. So either as you're falling asleep or during sleep. Clenching or grinding teeth. I don't know about anyone here. I actually wear a night guard because I'm a clencher. But people can grind their teeth at night and it can really impact their sleep and also really contribute to headaches. And then bad dreams or sleepwalking, particularly if there's any trauma around the nature of the injury. So that can also be another type of sleep disorder. The other thing I get asked about often that I like to talk about is that sleep and fatigue are actually not the same thing. So feeling sleepy and feeling fatigued can be related, but as I say, they're not the same. So there's two types of fatigue: physical fatigue that we get after we've done a big workout or, a long walk or whatever, and mental fatigue or cognitive fatigue. And it's the cognitive fatigue that many people following brain injury experience. And that's because literally the brain needs more energy and uses more resources to do activities that prior to the injury were seemingly simple and didn't require a lot of effort. And it's very frustrating because we actually can't measure fatigue. We can measure the functional impact of fatigue and how it makes you feel, but we can't measure it in the body. On the other hand, we can actually measure sleep and we can measure sleep processes. So that's one of the reasons why we're very clear that they are different. People can sleep really well and still feel fatigued. So again, just explaining that they're not exactly the same thing. So the good news. So now I've hopefully explained a little bit to you about what is sleep, what happens in the brain when we sleep, why are the different stages important, what types of sleep problems are common following brain injury. And now let's talk about what are some of the things that we can do to facilitate good sleep. So, the first thing that we always start with is what we call sleep hygiene. And I'm sure many of you have heard about that. All that really means is establishing a routine for sleep and wakefulness. And again, as I said earlier, we are creatures of habit. We like routines. And we do need to prepare our bodies for sleep, and we need to prepare our bodies for wakefulness. So, wherever possible, go to bed and get up at the same time each day, even on the weekends, if possible. If this is difficult, try to keep it within half an hour either way. If you're going to bed at a different time and getting up at a different time every night, that is really going to mess your sleep up. So the first thing is to try to establish a consistent sleep-wake schedule. Yes, it really does make a difference. So we also want to think about our bedrooms. All these things seem obvious, but this is really where it's important for all of us to start. So make sure it's quiet. Um, do you share a room with someone who snores? Do you have your pet sleep in your room? Do you have blackout curtains? So we don't want any light in the bedroom if possible. You want to think about the temperature. Use a humidifier if needed. I can't manage in the winter without my humidifier because just gets so dry. So these are all little things, but they really do make a big difference in helping your body to be in a good rest state. Number one, do not have a digital clock beside your bed. I'm going to repeat that. Do not have a digital clock beside your bed. Don't have your phone with the time beside your bed. I know I sound like a bossy mom, and I'm doing that on purpose, because what happens is if we have a clock beside our bed and we have to get up to go to the bathroom, as soon as we look at the clock, our brain performs a cognitive activity. A, it sees the light, and B, it sees the time. And immediately our brains go into, oh my gosh, it's 4 o'clock in the morning and I have to get up at 6 and I can't sleep. And it starts that cycle. Okay. It doesn't matter what time it is. And seeing the time is not going to be helpful. Like, it really is not. So my suggestion is, don't have a clock that has any kind of light on it, and don't check the time if you have to get up. Don't, wherever possible, don't keep your computer in your room or your TV. Turn off all your electronic devices maybe an hour before you go to sleep. If you're watching a bit of TV to kind of wind down at the end of the night, I do that. That's okay as long as it's in a different room. But we really want to associate our bedroom for sleep. So we do not want to be doing computer activities and cognitively demanding activities before we go to bed. So this is really important. Again, I mentioned the light, because when there's light in the room, the light stimulates something called the pineal gland. Our pineal glands is where the melatonin is released. So as soon as we see light, that blocks the release of melatonin, and we wake up. So darkness is also very important. So tips for the bedroom: make it cozy and welcome. I look to see a picture that made me think of coziness. I'm all about cozy. So as I say, don't look at the clock. If you can navigate without having to turn on a light, that's ideal. But otherwise, use a very low night light. Splurge on, if you can, soft, comfy sheets and a good pillow. You want to signal that going to bed is a pleasurable experience. We don't want it to think about, oh my gosh, I'm getting into bed, but I know I'm not going to sleep and my bed's uncomfortable and I have pain. So, wherever possible, make your bed as cozy and comfy and snuggly as possible. The other thing is that our beds are for sleep and intimacy. That's it. Maybe a bit for reading, but otherwise, again, don't eat, don't use your computer, don't talk on your phone, because again, we want to signal to our brain, my bed means it's sleep time. Daytime suggestions. So there are things that can help us to wake up. So set a gentle alarm to try and wake up at the same time each morning. I hate actual alarms. That sound is just really toxic to me. So I really like the Philips Sunrise Wake Up Light, which uses light, and you can set different sounds. I like the bird sounds, and the light just slowly increases for about the half hour to 40 minutes before wake up time, and you start to hear birds. So that's a lovely, peaceful way to wake up. The other thing that's really important is that you include meaningful activities in your daily schedule. It's hard to feel like we have a reason to get up if we're not doing something meaningful. So if you're struggling with depression, mood issues, etc., make sure that you speak with someone about it. Make sure that you get help for that. Join in the wonderful activities that are offered through Brain Injury of York Region, through BIST. Call a friend, get out, go for a walk, but find things that give you meaning in the day. And I know that's easier said than done. I don't mean to be patronizing in any way. It's just important to have reasons to be up during the day. Try to limit your TV watching and screen time in general, because again, they really impact our sleep. Exercise every day. People with brain injuries who exercise regularly report fewer sleep problems. That's the same for aging, in response to your question, Marie. One of the ways that we can maintain good sleep as we age is through exercise. The more we exercise, the better our sleep at night. So that's really critical. And exercise can look like many different things for people with brain injuries. Maybe it's swimming, maybe it's chair yoga, maybe it's qigong. A wonderful program is Love Your Brain Yoga. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but I'm actually a Love Your Brain Yoga trained practitioner. Love Your Brain Yoga is free online yoga and meditation sessions specifically designed for people with brain injuries, and I just can't speak highly enough of them. I collaborate with them and I do a lot of work with them. The other really important thing is to try to get outdoors for some sunlight during the daytime. So many of us struggle with SAD or seasonal affective disorder during the winter when we don't get as much light. That's a real thing, and it impacts people with brain injuries as well. So there are actual light boxes, a blue light box for therapy. They're available on Amazon. They're not very expensive and they can be really helpful. So one of the things that I've noticed now, as I said, my kids are young adults now, so I don't deal with them waking up or going to bed. They're not even living at home anymore. But I do have a new puppy. So she wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so I get up to be with her. And right away we go outside and it's starting to get cold, but that's okay because I go out and I look up at the sky and I feel the air and I see the trees, and right away that blue sky stimulates, it literally goes through my eyes and it stimulates my brain and it wakes me up. So there's a reason why we have blue light blockers for our glasses, because we don't want the blue light from our computers to keep us awake, but we do want the blue light from the sky to wake us up in the morning. So that's, again, something that's really important. Wherever you can, even if it's just looking out your window first thing in the morning, get that outdoor sky right in your eyes. So let's talk about napping. Ideally, we don't want to nap more than 30 minutes during the day because it does disrupt our nighttime sleep. So I appreciate that for some of you that may not be possible. These are general suggestions. As I say, I'm not prescribing or telling you what to do. I'm just letting you know. And some people will need to nap more than that, but ideally that's what you should aim for. Try not to nap after 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And that goes for all of us, brain injury or no brain injury, because if we do, it's going to impact our nighttime sleep. The other thing is pace yourself. So we know that most people with brain injuries don't have as much energy and they struggle with fatigue and slow processing. So plan your day. So, most of your activities take place at your peak energy time. For most people following brain injury, that's late morning, early afternoon. So if your doctor's trying to schedule a 9 o'clock appointment with you and you have the option to say, it's better for me if we do it at 11, so that I can really focus and give you my full attention, then do that. The other thing is using nutrition to help with energy levels. So keeping protein in your diet is really, really important. And having protein snacks throughout the day, like whether it's nuts or seeds or a protein drink, just making sure that you keep your protein levels up. So there are also some nighttime suggestions. We talked about keeping a consistent bedtime and wake time, and following a bedtime routine. And this is interesting for me as well, because I did share that I had a period of time where I had really, really poor sleep. And now I'm actually a very good sleeper, for which I'm very grateful. I do exercise a lot, but I also have a very clear bedtime routine. And, I fairly early in the evening, I get into my pajamas, I do my face stuff because I'm older and I take care of my skin. I brush my teeth, I turn the lights down low, I get my pillows set up the way that I want them so that when I go upstairs and I get into bed, I don't wake myself up again by turning on lights to get on my pajamas and brush my teeth. So that's my bedtime routine. And I'm pretty consistent with that, and it really does make a difference. Okay. If possible, get into a meditation routine to help quiet your mind. There's been lots of research in the brain injury world to show that meditation is very efficacious, as also with the Love Your Brain yoga, which does involve some meditation. Um, there is a device called the Muse, and I'm going to show you a picture of that later on. I actually use the Muse. I try to meditate probably 4 times a week for actually half an hour, because I find that if I just meditate for 10 minutes, I really don't get into that deep, relaxed state. But start with whatever works for you. But if you can build a consistent meditative practice, it's really helpful. Other things that are helpful, a white noise maker, a mindfulness app on your phone, anything you find soothing. Maybe it's, rain. You find an app that sounds like rain falling or ocean waves or anything that's soothing and repetitive that will kind of lull you into sleep. You don't want anything that has sharp changes in pitch. Again, it should be soft and calming and repetitive. So this is what the Muse looks like. You can order them online. They're not cheap. They're about $450, but I've had mine for about 4 years, and it still works really, really well. So to me, it was a good investment. As an OT, I'm not an OT, but Ellen, I know you're an OT. I strongly suggest, like, this is a really valuable therapy device. So if you are looking at aids that you can purchase for a client, I really like the Muse. So what the Muse does is it delivers a really lovely sound through your AirPods. There's different types. I don't like the ones that have words, because that again stimulates my brain. So for me, I just have different background sounds, and it measures your brain waves, your heart rate, and movement. Now, there's other things you can get on top of that, but you have to pay more money, and I don't really care. But I've really found that using that has helped me to build a steady meditation practice. The Muse was also developed and researched in Canada at the University of Toronto, Mississauga campus, in their psychology and neuroscience department, and there's lots of research on its efficacy as well. So things to avoid. These are the to-dos. These are the things we don't want to do. So really, the nutrition that we take in also has a huge impact on sleep. No caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, and sugar for 5 hours before bedtime, if you can. Okay, again, everybody's lifestyle is different, but in the ideal world, those are things to keep in mind. All of these things have what we call a half-life, so they take time to clear through our system, and they will affect your sleep. Avoid eating prior to sleep to allow time to digest, but you also maybe don't want to go to bed hungry, because this can also wake you up from sleep. But ideally, you don't want to feel uncomfortable and bloated and full when you're going to bed. Also, ideally, don't exercise within 2 hours of bedtime, but stretching and meditation may help. I don't know if any of you have ever been involved in nighttime sports activities where you might have had a late practice or a late game, or maybe you're a theater actor or performer and you had a late performance, and you come home and you're wired and we can't fall asleep. So that's why. So it's really important, again, to get your brain into that rest state to prepare ourselves for sleep. Sorry, where are we here? And we're coming towards the end. Also, things to avoid. As I already mentioned, don't do eating, reading, or watching TV in bed. Maybe some reading, but other than that, like, really keep activities out of your bed. Keep stress out of the bedroom. Don't try to pay your bills in the bedroom or do things that are stressful. As I keep saying, we want to associate our bed and our bedroom with rest and sleep. Now, the other thing is, what happens if you get into bed and you're tossing and turning and you don't fall asleep? Should you stay in bed or should you get up? So there is something called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. We'll talk a little bit about that. And that suggests that don't do that. Get up, leave the bedroom, go do something relaxing or boring until you feel sleepy, and then go back into the bedroom. Because if you lie in bed tossing and turning and thinking about how you can't fall asleep, that will also have a negative impact on your sleep. So if you're not falling asleep right away, get up, go do an activity, and keep going. So things that may help, looking to the evidence. There is evidence, there's lots of evidence that taking magnesium and zinc supplements help with sleep. Magnesium is calming, and zinc also plays a role in sleep and also plays a little bit of a role in memory. There is evidence that blue light therapy, that blue light box that I talked about, or energy therapy for half an hour in the morning can help to improve daytime wakefulness and nighttime sleep, as well as enhanced mood and lessen fatigue. So Philips sells an energy light, which is available on Amazon. There are other ones as well. I don't have a say, I like this one versus that one. I haven't tried them all. I've had a Philips one. And again, they're not that expensive. Try not to use them for more than half an hour because they can be overstimulating, but using that in the morning, basically as soon as you get up, can be really helpful. There is also evidence that creatine, which is a supplement, can help support cognitive function and provide cognitive energy, even in cases of sleep deprivation. And there's also evidence that acupuncture can help with insomnia in some people. So a friendly reminder, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not a naturopathic doctor, and I cannot prescribe. So if you have questions about dosage for supplements, I encourage you to consult a naturopathic doctor, or at the very least, the staff at your local health food store. Most of them do have some training. So I wouldn't just go into a grocery store like Blah's or whatever and grab whatever off the shelf. I would go to a health food store and have a conversation if you're not in a position to work with a naturopath. So again, mindfulness meditation, there's lots of evidence. There is evidence that yoga nidra can help, and they do yoga nidra in Love Your Brain Yoga as well. So yoga nidra is also referred to as yogic sleep. So it is a guided meditation practice that helps to promote a state of deep relaxation, sort of in between wakefulness and sleep, allowing the person to rest while the mind remains conscious. Some people do fall asleep, which is actually a good thing. That makes us feel good. So typically done lying down, it involves a sequence of guided instructions that helps you to progressively relax the body and the mind, often using techniques like a body scan and visualization. And it reduces stress, it improves sleep, it increases self-awareness. And there's also been studies to show that there are actually positive neuroplastic changes in the brain for people who practice yoga nidra. So people often ask me about stimulants like Ritalin, Adderall, etc., because some doctors will prescribe that to help keep people awake during the day. Some people find it helpful. Other people find it just makes them run out of gas faster. So talk to your doctor. And if you are prescribed these, it may take time to tweak the dosage. So don't just take it and say, gosh, this makes me feel really wired and weird, but keep going. Go back and work with your physician or primary care provider to establish a dosage that works for you. Maintain your blood sugar levels. Eat protein, as I said, good, healthy foods. Eating a lot of processed junk foods makes us feel lethargic, and it is definitely going to impact our sleep. As I mentioned, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia may be helpful. Counseling can be very helpful if this is impacting your mood. If you must use screens in the evening or even throughout the day, I have blue blocker lenses in all my computer glasses. And put your screen in night mode because that will really help as well. And then for families and loved ones, it's really important that you understand that lack of sleep or restful sleep can be debilitating. as I say, we can't measure this, but it is a chronic condition. And so, try to schedule important activities or conversations with your loved one who is the survivor at a time when is their best energy. Support your loved one to have regular breaks and healthy living. Don't expect them to go out and do something for 3 hours without a break. So we all need to work together to facilitate this. Make time. It's also helpful when your whole family maintain a regular sleep-wake schedule, exercise together as a family. And if you suspect that your family member has a sleep disorder, encourage them to actually speak to their doctor. So, as a society, we need to take sleep seriously and we need to be taught how to have good sleep. Our society is so sleep deprived. But if you do suspect a sleep disorder, it's very, very common. It's really important to have a thorough assessment and diagnosis. Sleep, as you've maybe learned today, is very complex, and disorders can be multifactorial and can be associated with other conditions. So it can't hurt to have an actual sleep study. So that's it for today. I'm happy to take time for questions, and I will stop sharing my screen. So
I've learned that I probably break all the rules.
we all do at sometimes, right?
All the rules. I find reading for me, I have to read before I go to sleep.
And that's fine. That's
I
fine.
will even do it in the middle of the night if I wake up and I cannot fall back to sleep, clear my mind because I start thinking about whatever is on my head. I will open up my book and read, and I literally will fall back to sleep. The book's still here. Like it's the only thing that I can clear my head with that way. So yeah, and
Yeah,
the
that's
news is
that's
something that I
absolutely fine. When
certainly,
reading, I agree. Like if you're reading for pleasure and
yes,
it's distracting you from everything else and you're engaged in what you love, go for it. These are all suggestions. I mean, as I said, reading is okay in bed. The other activities, I would say no. And I absolutely, Ellen, you are doing the right thing. So if you're not sleeping, get up and read. Don't lie there going, oh my gosh, I'm not sleeping. Isn't this terrible? Like get up,
right.
engage your mind in something that's soothing and distracting, and then you fall back to sleep. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. Okay. I know there were some questions in the
Yes.
chat. Okay, so I will go through.